Hello, trading is closed on June 17th, 2020. We'll go over our calls. Look for the pattern with the early low. There it is. Tomorrow has the early high. We said unless we gapped and took out yesterday's high, we should see lower prices, and we closed in the red, so that worked too. Tomorrow has the early high. Usually when we gap up smartly, the call is killed, but what we said yesterday was gapping up and overtaking the high of day kills the call, and we didn't overtake the high of day. Now, frankly, I was expecting more of a decline than this, and it might still come, and we'll get into that in just a minute. During the day in the morning, MEJT gave a sell signal and an ultimate sell signal. We did trade lower. That wasn't enough to satisfy the signal. And eventually we traded lower, and that was. So that's played out. Now, the system gives targets, doesn't really give entries. Anyone who sat through this whole thing had to sit through a 30-point rally hoping for a few points more on the downside. It's not really the perfect way to play this. And just remember that MEJT is just one indicator, and you still have to be aware other indicators are there too, and you don't have to sit through something like this, even though if you did, eventually you would win. In the afternoon, MEJT said we hadn't dropped enough. In the morning, call hadn't been satisfied, so that rally was false. Said these rallies wouldn't stick, said these drops wouldn't stick, and they all retraced. And not many systems can catch all these moves. Doesn't mean you're going to play them, but at least gives you an idea of what's going on. Well, we're still on a buy signal from the volume spike. It should last at least a few days. Here was a volume signal here. It lasted a few days. This one's already lasted a few days. It might last more. It doesn't have to. Here's our wave count that we're using. It's possible that this is the wave down. We're making an ABC up, but you could also count this not as wave B, but ABC of B. So if that's all you have, you could go either way. That's no help. So let's look at some other stuff. Here was a huge drop earlier in the week. We couldn't maintain a close under prior lows. Here we have the opposite thing. In like a day, you rally 200 points in futures, and now you can't maintain closes over any of these highs. And just as this is a sign of rejection of the lows, this is a sign of rejection of the high, of the move to highs, but until you undercut this low, it doesn't mean a thing. This is an Adam and Eve top. Please don't write me and say it's a pattern which usually takes weeks or days at least to play out. It's the same principle. You have a spike. You spend a lot of time trying to break through and can't. Once you undercut this, a big drop happens. But we haven't broken through yet. And the catch is if you gap over these highs, then support holds and you have a good rally. Just as we couldn't maintain a break over the highs, we've been dropping here. We just can't close under any of these lows, and that probably isn't an accident either. So we have mixed indicators, and you all know the rules. Commonest thing is a gap and prompt move outside the day's range. I don't like to guess on the direction. Thursday features the early high. Doesn't mean you won't gap down. Typically, it's a negative day with a low in the last hour, but if you rally strongly in the first hour or two, usually leads to further rallying in the days immediately following. It's bearish for 2 days straight. We've gapped up, hit a higher high, closed under all the highs. Today we even closed under some of these lows. But it's positive and negative day, like today, held over prior lows. If, that's an if, we gap under recent lows, the potential is there for a sizable drop. But if, and that's an if, we gap over today's high, potential is there for a sizable rally. We have a Norm Linsky interview today. I don't know much about his stuff, but according to him, Mercury is going retrograde today, and the last time that happened was on February 17th, and that was a major market peak. Doesn't mean every time Mercury goes retrograde you get a major market peak, but it's one of the things I look for. I mean, one of the things he looks for. When I see a Mercury going retrograde, it means my neighbor is pulling his car out of the garage. But to him, that's a very important sign. And if we gap down smartly tomorrow, potential is there for a very sizable drop. I think it could take us into the 2900s myself. But that hasn't happened yet. And gapping over here means just the opposite. Tomorrow's open is going to be interesting. Pattern with the early high. We're holding support now, but look out below if it gives way. And that's today's call.